demand and supply is the main foundation to A, any economics course, and B, really understanding why things happen in the economy, why prices change, why, what is the makes it to where when prices go down, people want more, or, what drives the housing market, what drives food and all that. So it really becomes important to understand demand and supply. Now, before you can bring them together, it becomes important to understand them separately. And so the first thing we need to look at then is demand. Now, with demand, there are three things that need to happen for you to be included in demand. So first things first, you need to want the good. May sound pretty obvious, but it's something that has to be the case. You need to want it. Now, do not confuse that with liking the good. Because you want it doesn't mean you like it. And so, cough medicine, for example. You may not like it, but you know that if you take it, it'll make you feel better, and so you want it. All right, so that's one. Two, you need to be able to afford the good. It has to be something that you can afford. So I want a $5 million beach house. Can't afford it. All right, so I'm not going to be included in demand. Finally, you need to have a plan to buy the good or service. So it's not just something enough to want it and to be able to afford it, but if at a given price, that's what the price is, you also have to have a plan to buy it. So all three are necessary to be part of demand. You need to want the good, be able to afford it, and have a plan to buy it. Now, when I talk about demand, a lot of people think of the idea of wants. Wants and demand, same thing. They're not, though. So demand and wants are two completely different things. One of the basics when we talk about economics is that we have unlimited wants. And when it comes down to it, though, we talked about this idea of scarce resources. We don't have unlimited money or unlimited time. And so demand captures that part of which of our wants we choose to satisfy. So the wants is, everything we want. The demand is a reflection of which of those wants we actually decide to go with. Now, there's an important distinction that needs to be made here right off the bat. Demand versus quantity demanded. So I'll talk about demand in a second. Demand is a relationship. Quantity demanded, which is completely separate from demand, is the number of units, the quantity that people demand basically at a given price. So, we'll talk about in a second, but demand is a relationship between the price and the quantity demanded, whereas quantity demanded is just the quantity. Okay, so it's an important distinction there. So now, the law of demand. What does that mean? The law of demand, and this kind of has it written here, it says other things remaining the same, talk about that a little more later, the higher the price of a good, the smaller the quantity demanded. And the lower the price of the good, the higher the quantity demanded. So it basically describes this inverse relationship. So as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. As price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. And so the basic idea is that as price goes down, you're going to have more people who are going to fall into that want, afford, and plan to buy group. So it's going to capture more of those people as the price goes down. But then the question is, well, why is that? Okay. So there's two reasons why, two effects that really drive that. The substitution effect and the income effect. So let's first start with the substitution effect. The substitution effect explains the law of demand by basically saying that as the price of a good goes down, it becomes relatively less expensive compared to other goods, and so you're going to substitute some of those other goods for this good. And so for the example with apples and oranges, so if the price of an apple goes down, relatively speaking, an apple is becoming less expensive. And so compared to oranges. And so the idea is that because that's the case, you're going to buy fewer oranges and now more apples. So let's go back to our example with the apples and oranges to kind of show that. So in our original example, we had apples costing $1 and oranges costing $2. And so with $2, you can buy either 2 apples or 1 orange. So what that means is that for every orange you buy, okay, it costs you $2, which is you have to give up 2 apples. And for every apple you buy, you have to give up half of an orange. So when that's the case, you may be looking at that and saying, well, let's see, for $2, I can either get 1 orange or 2 apples. So if I'm going to buy an orange, it's going to cost me 2 apples. Right? I don't know if it's worth it for me. All right? So maybe I only have a few oranges, but mostly apples. But what's going to happen then, and let's say that the price of an orange drops to 50 cents. So now instead of an orange, so now you can buy 4 oranges with $2. And that relative price that we talked about is now 1 orange is the same as half of an apple. So now every orange you buy, you don't have to give up 2 apples, you only have to give up half of an apple. And the idea is that because that price went down, it is now becoming more enticing to buy a little bit less apples and a little more oranges, because it's not quite as expensive as it was. And so the substitution effect says that if the price goes down, you're going to substitute the good where the price went down away from the other goods where the price stayed the same. And the opposite holds true, where if the price goes up, it becomes more expensive relative. Let's say the price of an orange went up to $4. So now instead of every orange costing you half of an apple, it costs you 4 apples. That's a lot of apples. So you might say, all right, you know what, that's a lot that I have to give up for every orange, so I'm going to buy some less oranges and more apples. So that is the substitution effect. The second type of effect that explains the law of demand is the income effect. With the income effect, the idea is that as the price of a good goes up, it's going to take up a larger portion of your overall budget, meaning that you will be less likely to buy it, because we only have so many things that we need to spend our money on, or we only have so much money to spend what we need and get what we need. So we need a lot of things. We need health, clothing, food, education, so forth. So what's going to happen then is that, for a lot of people, we have those scarce resources. We have that limited amount of money. And so if the price of a good goes up and it takes up a larger portion of our budget, well, if we're going to buy the same amount there, that's money that's coming out of that overall budget. So what most people do then is, if that's the case, they will buy less. So if the price goes up, it takes up a larger portion of your budget, and so you buy less. If the price goes down, it constitutes a smaller percentage of your budget. So you might say, all right, well, look, it's not taking up so much of my budget anymore, so I'll give that a shot. All right, I'll buy a little more of that. And so when the price goes down, quantity demand goes up for that reason. And so, again, this is an important idea to understand, which is the law of demand. Other things the same. The higher the price of the good, the lower the quantity demanded. The lower the price of the good, the higher the quantity demanded. So again, we have this inverse relationship, which comes from, again, the substitution effect and the income effect.